Hi guys, welcome everyone. My name is Vera and today we're gonna paint our super fun daisy here that we call a blushing daisy. And we're gonna paint it on wood. So that's super exciting. Hopefully you have all your wood surfaces prepared. If you prefer to paint this on a canvas, that's totally fine. It's your call. I would be painting it on wood. I would actually be painting on the other side of the same wood piece here. But yeah, if all you have is a canvas or a piece of paper, that's okay too. I think this looks super cool on wood, and wood is actually not very hard to access. It's sold in most craft stores or even in a dollar store. If you go to the dollar store, you'll find a lot of wooden pieces that you could use, or like wooden items, whatever you want to call them, that you could use to paint on. So you could use one of them as well, or you could have a live edge, like a rough edge wood, like we have here, whatever you want to paint on. Let's talk for a second about how to prep your wood. So what you're gonna need is sand it nicely. So if your wood is rough, a bit on the rougher side, you may want to use a few different grades of sandpaper. You might want to use something harsher at first, so something, let's say 200 or 220, and then something softer, something finer as your second round of sanding, maybe like 400 or even a finer grade, whatever you have, 600, I don't know, whatever the finest you can find. That would give you the best sanding. If your wood, it doesn't normally come pretty smooth, maybe it doesn't even need sanding, or maybe you can just do with a fine grit sanding paper. But regularly, for regular wood that you can buy in like a dollar store, I would probably recommend 2 layers of sanding, one with a tougher grit and one with a finer grit. So once you sand it, there's nothing else that needs to be done to it. You don't need to prime it with anything. Nothing else needs to be done. Especially if you're planning to keep it indoors, if you're not planning to have it outside, then no priming is necessary. All right, and what are we gonna start with here? Before we move to painting, we're gonna start with a sketch. So all you need right now is just a regular HB pencil and preferably an eraser. And we're gonna start with a sketch. And guys, for those of you who are joining us for the first time and maybe you're not familiar with how this works and what to expect, this is a video tutorial. It's premiering right now, it's pre-recorded. So you can pause it at any time and you can come back to it anytime. It's not going anywhere, it's gonna remain right here on our YouTube channel, and you can come back and do it anytime. So no rush if you can't do it today, or maybe you just accidentally stumbled on it and you are not even prepared. That's okay too, no problem. All right, so for now, all you're gonna need is a pencil and an eraser. And I'm going to turn my piece onto the other side, and this is the side that I'm gonna be working on today. So what I'm going to start with, I normally just start with indicating where the middle of my flower is going to be. And I would say, it's safe to say, it's going to be right in the middle, vertically, on the left side. And then I'm going to add a little circle. It can be bigger, it can be smaller, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to make mine a little bit darker, just so you guys can see it better. If I was painting this for myself without making it into a video, I'd probably keep it extremely light, because really you don't need the darkness. You're not going to see the pencil in the end. And then after that, I'm going to start sketching my flower petals. What can be helpful, what you can find helpful, is actually making a little line that will help you keep the proper shape to your flower. So again, imagine that there's a big circle going around here, right? So you're making that part of a big circle. And the reason why it is helpful to have this line is because now you can keep all your flower petals within this circle, and in the end of at the end of this painting, you're going to have a flower that's actually circular shape. If you don't do this line, there is a possibility that you end up with some flower petals being, somewhere on top being, or on the bottom, doesn't really matter where, depending on the size and shape of your piece. Some flower petals may end up being much longer, some flower petals may end up being much shorter, and then you might look at it in the end and be like, oh, it's cricket. It's not straight, like it's not circular, and that may bother you. It may not bother you, you never know. Maybe that's your style, maybe that will make you happy. But just to avoid that, I would say it's safer to do the circle right away, and then you can decide whether you want to follow it or not. I mean, this is just a guideline. We're going to erase it in the end. We're not keeping the circle. This is just a guideline for positioning our flower petals and for knowing how far do we go with that. So now we have our prep. Now we can start adding our flower petals. And I'm going to do my flower petals in a few different layers. I'm going to do my first layer first, and then after that I'm going to fill in a few at the back. I'm going to try to keep them fairly close to my original as far as shape and positioning, but also it doesn't really matter. You go ahead and do your own. It's just flower petals. Whatever shape you make them, whatever size you make them, whatever number of flower petals you add, that's what it's going to be. There's nothing wrong with it. It's flower, so make it unique to you. All right, I'm going to start somewhere right here with the smallest one. So do you have a little, as you can see, I have a little baby here. So I'm going to put this one here. I always try to make my flower petals a bit wider in the middle and give them some sort of interesting shape. And you see this one I'm not bringing all the way to the edge of the line because this one is a baby. It's a smaller one. It's supposed to be smaller. It's not going to be the last layer. It's just the first layer. All right, that's my first one, and then I'm going to move up. So do you see there is a second one that's full and goes all the way? So I'm going to add that guy there. And notice how my flower petals, all of them are sort of pointier at the ends, and they have a really narrow beginning, but they're all a bit wider in the middle. And that's what I wanted. That's what I want them to look like. All right, so I have this two. Now I can fill up the top. So basically this section, I'm gonna add one right behind this one. So it's still first layer, but it's kind of hiding a little bit behind. You see, and then one more hiding behind that one. All right, and then I'm gonna add, well, actually, let's reserve the second layer for later. It's not a big deal. So let's move further with the first layer. So I'm gonna add the one that's hiding right underneath this little guy here. Then again, one more peeking right behind this little guy, behind this guy. You see there's one hiding right behind it. So I'm gonna add that one next. Maybe I'll change the shape slightly. All right, that looks cute. I like it. And then I will do two more here on the first-ish layer. So you see I have this big one that's slightly touching this one. I'm gonna start it somewhere here. All right, and then the last one. And this is the first layer of my flower petals. Again, yours can look completely different. They don't have to look exactly like that, but because I'm trying to show you how to teach this particular painting, I am going to keep mine pretty close to my original creation. But again, feel free to make it your own. There's nothing wrong. Let your flower petals do whatever they want to do. As long as you have multiple layers of flower petals and they look good and they have the shape that you like, they look interesting, they don't look like a copy paste flower petal, it's all great. So that's probably one thing I would suggest avoiding. I mean, unless that's the look you're going for, I would suggest avoiding just doing the same flower petal over and over again. See how all of them on a first layer are slightly different. They have slightly different bends, slightly different width, slightly different length. They're just different. They're not a copy paste the same one. So I would probably say do the same. Try to make them unique and different just to create that something interesting about this, right? Okay, and once we have our first layer, we're going to move on to our second layer. So second and third, however many you want, right? So I'm going to start by adding one right in between here. We'll make it peek through here. That's one. And then two more to kind of cover those holes. Do you see? Then we have these little gaps. So just basically trying to get rid of those little gaps by adding extra flower petals in there. You're not going to see them very much. This is where this line, this overall circle, comes very handy. Or at least that's what I find. For me, it does. All right, I'll get one more here. And as you noticed, when I'm adding them in, I don't always necessarily put them right in the middle between my two flower petals. Sometimes I'll put it a bit to the left or a bit to the right. Again, to make it a bit more interesting, it doesn't have to be positioned right in between the two front row of flower petals to kind of fill the gap perfectly. It can definitely be a bit more one way or the other. I'll put two here and one little guy right here. Ta-da! My sketch is done, and now I can remove the outer line, the big circle line, because I don't need it. All right, our sketch is done. my at least done, and feel free to work on yours until you feel happy about it, and then put your pencil aside. And now let's talk about the rest of our supplies. What we're going to need after our sketch is done is we are going to need paint, we're going to need brushes, we're going to need paper towel and water. So I got my paper towel here, put it right here, it's a good spot for it. I have my paint. I'm going to be using student grade acrylics, primary colors only, which is yellow, red, blue, plus black and white, and I'll be mixing them into all the shades that you can see here. However, if you prefer pre-mixed colors, you can grab one shade of pink, so something on a darker side, preferably like a magenta or just a hot pink. You can grab teal, again, or blue, whatever you prefer, at about medium teal, medium blue. You can grab some orange plus black and white and use those as your mixing colors versus just the primaries. Whatever works for you, whatever you prefer. But I'm going to be mixing from primaries, and I'm going to show you how to do that from primaries as well. So as long as you have those colors, you can follow along and do everything that we're about to do here. Now, as far as brushes, I'm going to be using, again, a set of pretty much what we always use and what we always recommend is 3 different brushes, large, medium, and small. In my case, I'm going to be using large and medium square today, and I'm going to be using small detailed brush as always. So this brush is actually pretty important for this painting because there is lots of fine details that need to be done specifically with this brush. So make sure you have a small brush with a pointy tip. So do you see how it's nice and pointy? That's what you're looking for. So you can do those really beautiful flowy lines. And on top of that, it would be nice to have a few other brushes such as large and medium, or if you have more than that, you can grab more than that. You can grab a variety of sizes. It's totally up to you whether they're going to be square or pointy or rounded. They can be any shape. I would say square is probably my preferable shape for this painting, but again, that's not a requirement. It will work equally just as well with a rounded or pointy brushes. So whatever you prefer. And of course, we're going to need some more water because we can't do any of this without water. All right, so I'm going to be doing this in layers. There'll be lots and lots and lots of layering here. I'm going to start with just coloring in my flower petals with 2 shades. I'm going to do lighter pink on the ends and lighter pink in the middle, darker pink on the ends. And that'll be my first layer. And then after that, I'm going to be flicking other shades in there. So I'm going to start with my large brush. And I'm going to start by making my color. So I'm going to scoop some red on the side. I'm going to make my darker pink here. It's entirely up to you when I say darker, how dark you want to go. You can go really hot pink, you can go medium pink. I think I would like to stay fairly dark, so this should be good for my darker one. And for my lighter one, it's the same component, so basically white and red, but we're just gonna make it clearly lighter. And I would say I would go with medium light. So again, I wouldn't be going with too light of a color because I'm gonna be lightening it up later with my white, and I don't want to end up with like a super pale flower. I still want my flower to have a nice color. But again, that's my preference. You can definitely go lighter or darker than that. As long as there is nice contrast between the 2 colors, that's pretty much all we're looking for here. And it doesn't really matter which flower petal you start, whichever you're comfortable with. So let's start with this one because it's really up front so we can demonstrate on it. So I'm going to start by coloring in this mid-ish part with my lighter pink. And then I'm going to take my darker pink and I'm going to color in the bottom, flick it up right away and try to merge it. So wash off my brush, dab it off on a paper towel, try to merge the 2 colors, and then I'm going to add a bit of that from the tip. the flower so the tip is just a touch darker as well. And again, merge them nicely. And I'm gonna do that to every single flower petal. So if you want, you can use your large brush. If it's easier to use a medium, totally fine. It is whatever works for you. For me, large is still okay here, but once I stop, once it's gonna be not comfortable for me to use large, I'm gonna switch to a medium. So let's go to the next one. Let's do this guy here. Same thing, we added pink there. Then I didn't even wash my brush right away, I just took a darker one and I took it from the bottom up and I brought it a little bit along this edge as well, where the two flower petals connect, to kind of separate them, to have darker color on a lower one and lighter color on the upper one. We'll do just a touch on the top and again we'll blend them. All right, moving to the next one. Might even add a bit of lighter pink here, again just to separate them a touch. Oh yeah, that looks good. And maybe a bit lighter pink on this side too, because again, I'm going to be adding a bit more darker one on the other side. So now I'm going to take the darker one and bring it here, and again a bit higher up to almost separate them a touch. Ta-da! That's my two flowers, and I ran out of paint, by the way, because I don't mix a lot of paint. If you guys painted with me before, let's add a bit more lighter pink here. If you guys painted with me before, you don't, I don't mix too much because I don't like wasting paint. So I only mix what I need, and then I have to mix it again, which is fine. So let's make another batch of paint here. And if your colors don't match precisely, it's not a problem. You will never see that in the end. Okay, so that's my lighter one. It's going to be my darker one. Okay, moving to the next one. And again, it doesn't really matter which one you start with, darker or lighter. Whatever works better for you. I'll start with the darker one here because I already have it on my brush. So I may as well, right? And this one I'm not going to do the tip darker because it makes no sense. I'll just do a lighter one now. Done. Now I'll do this baby, the little guy here. Just one fairly light. I will still add a bit of darker one, but not as much. Great. And I'm going to do next one. Next one, I'm going to start with a darker one. You can color this little corner there too. And then I'm going to move to a lighter one. And again, blend them. Next, It doesn't matter again which one you start with. I'll start with lighter one because I already have it on my brush. So I may as well, right? This is just the first layer, but it already looks quite nice. That looks great. Next one, we'll start with dark one again. And you can color in little corners there too. And notice how I still see my lines through, so I'm not really losing anything by doing that. And I'll switch to a lighter one. And blend them. And then my last one here. So we'll start with the lighter one. Then we'll move to a darker one. And then I'm going to finish the rest with a medium brush because I find that the large brush is a little bit too large for that. So I may as well switch to a smaller one. But first, let me make more paint because again, I'm running out, which is pretty normal, and I'm all right with that. And let's make some darker one too. Just a little bit. I'm not going to need much there. Okay, awesome. Dab it off, wash it, dab it off on a paper towel, put it aside, and we're going to grab our medium brush. And we'll do the same steps on our further areas here. Sometimes when I do small areas, I like doing a couple at a time. Just because I find it's faster, more efficient. But you don't have to do a couple at a time. You can do one at a time, that's totally fine. Technically, you could do this flower in any shades. It doesn't even have to be pinks. I would say as long as you follow kind of the same pattern and the same steps, it will look really great in the end. Last few here. Almost done. All right, a few more. Ta-da! All our flower petals have first layer. and they look great. I really like it. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna add a bit of orange. So some of the flower petals, especially ones on top, have a tiny smidge of orange, and it needs to be underneath all the lighter and darker sections that we're about to add. So I'm gonna start with that. You could technically use one of your pinks, preferably a light one, as a base, if you still have any. And just add a little bit of yellow there, and you will get that nice orange. You could even make it lighter by adding a bit more white, or you can keep it exactly the same shade. If you didn't have any light pink left, what you could have done is, again, mix it from scratch. It's the same component, so basically you mix your light pink first. You take some white, some red, you mix a light pink, and then you add a little bit of yellow, and there you go. That's your light peachy, slightly orangey color. So anywhere on that peachy, light orangey spectrum is great. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that. I'm going to start adding it on the left side, my flower petals. And if you just dry brush it, it should go nice and smooth. But if it doesn't, you can always wash off your brush, lightly dab it off on a paper towel, and then go over with a clean, slightly wet brush and use that water to smudge it. And it temporarily will change color because of water, but it will dry and it will be a nice smooth blending. All right, so I'm gonna add some here. I'm gonna add some on this one too. So I'm gonna add more on the top ones, and as I go lower and lower, it's gonna be less and less and less. And then I'm gonna add it on this one. Again, I'm just gonna blend with plain water. So I'm gonna wash my brush, dab it off on a paper towel, and then I'm gonna go ahead and blend with plain water. This one is gonna have lots of this orangey one, because again, it should be descending from there down, right? So that's, and then I'm gonna blend with the water again. This one should have the most, and then as we go lower, less and less and less. So this is pretty good, but I will still add it on maybe a few more, just a little bit, because I don't need much of it. So again, add some, then blend. Or maybe even this one a little bit, but again, just not a lot, because it needs to be getting less and less and less as we go down. All right, looks pretty good. Now after this, I'm gonna start adding my darker and lighter colors. And by darker and lighter colors, I still mean pinks. We're still gonna work in the same pink color scheme for a little bit before we move on to straight whites and blues and black and so on. We will do orange middle, but again, we're not gonna do that just yet. We need to add our black first, and then we'll do that. So for now, I'm gonna just retire my medium brush, and I'm gonna go back to my large brush to mix my paint. So the paint color that I'm gonna be using is gonna be hot pink with a mix of a tiny smidge of black. So again, I'm gonna take some red, put it on the side here, just a little bit of white, just a tiny, tiny smidgeroni of white. Mix it up. And then to this color, I'm gonna add just a little bit of black as well, not a lot. Do you see how little I'm adding? We'll add it, mix it up. If it wasn't enough, we'll add more, and we'll just continue doing that. But never take equal amounts of any paint and black, because black is a very dominant color. It will overtake it fast, and then it will be very hard for you to recover that paint. It would be easier, honestly, to mix a new one. So I mixed it. I think this should work really well, but again, we will try it. So for now, I'm just going to wash off my large brush, dab it off on a paper towel, put it aside, and I'm going to grab my small brush this time for this. And I'm going to water down this paint a little bit. And I'm watering it down for a few reasons. Reason number one, the most important one, is consistency. It's very hard to do very long, flowy lines when your paint is thick. When your paint is nice and liquid, you can get really long lines, and that's what we need for this painting. Reason number two is transparency. It wouldn't hurt for it to be slightly more transparent. There's nothing wrong with not being transparent, but it's actually gonna look better if a paint was slightly more transparent. So we're watering down for those two reasons. I mean, you don't have to do it like a watercolor transparency level, but still just a little more transparent than normal paint would be. And with this paint, I'm gonna start adding what almost looks like outlines. It doesn't matter where we start. I think this one is something we committed to here. So I'm gonna start with the bottom, and I'm just gonna add this almost like an outline along the edges. You see? And now I'm gonna add a few of those on the inside. As you can see, I'm not bringing them, too high up or making them too dominant. If you want to bring them higher up in a couple areas, I would probably recommend doing that a bit closer to the edge. And again, you can always water down them a bit more to have a bit more transparency around here. That's what I'm doing. I'm watering down a little bit more as I flick it towards the middle part here, just to have it a bit more transparent and softer looking. You can add a few from the very top, just a few. Right, something like that. Then I'm going to move to next one again, starting with what looks like almost like an outline. And then, because this one is behind the first one, I'm going to darken it up a bit from around where the two colors connect. So the two flower petals, sorry, not two colors. The two flower petals connect. So from here, I'm going to darken it up. See, I'm going to flick some from there up to make sure there is a bit more visual separation between them. And I'm going to water it down a bit more here. Okay, looking good. And the same for the next one. So again, because they connect here, that's the area where I'm going to darken up my next one. I'm going to flick some from the very bottom again, but also some from this connection of two flower petals to visually lift up the one that is a bit on top, a bit above, and drown a bit the one that's behind. All right, and I'm going to continue doing that all the way around. So let's go to, which one should we go next? Let's go to this little guy right here. So this little guy is not going to have that much going on because again, he's very small and very upfront. So there's no need to flick too much on him at all. There will be a lot of darkening around him. So this guy behind him is going to be definitely much darker. This guy too. And add some flicking, 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 flicking. And this one. And on this little guy here, it's not going to be very dark, but because it borders with this really light one, there will still be some darkness here. All right, moving to next one, again darker. Notice I'm using the same paint, I'm not mixing a new one, but in certain areas I'm able to use it darker because I'm using just generally a bit more paint on my brush, so I'm going a little heavier with my paint to get them darker. And a second reason why they look darker is because I'm using less watered down paint. This area in between are just going to be very dark. In betweener sections, and we're actually going to add lots of black there later. So if they look almost the same right now as the rest of the bottoms, that's all right. And this guy right here, and the little guy behind him, and the last two. All right, and this step is also done. Next one, I'm actually going to move on to lightening up the opposite side. So you can either use really extremely light pink or straight white. I think I'm going to go with the light pink this time. So I'm going to scoop some white on the side here. I'll add just a tiny, tiny smidge of red. I'll make a really nice light pink, lighter than your previous light pink. It should be very light, and with this I'm going to start lightening it up from the ends. So basically this middle part and the tip should be the lightest sections. And again, water down your paint. It's much, much easier to do this with a liquid paint versus with a paint that's thick. And I'm just going to do that to every single flower petal. And you see how nice and complex they start looking. It's all this layering that adds really nice complexity here. So do you see how it adds a lot of contrast too? I'm going to continue using that lighter pink. It can be almost like a little repetitive, but just try to, get into the zone as you do this. Last few here. Almost done. And again, I hope you guys going at your own pace. If you need a break at any point, please pause the video, come back to it whenever you're ready. I'm not sure if you can pause it at the premiere, during the premiere, but it's going to remain on YouTube after premiere as well, so there really is no rush. Oh, I think I forgot one. I think I forgot one right here. Let's get it. Let's get that one. And ta-da! This layer is also done. So the next one that I want to do is going to be my teal, and then I'm going to move straight into black. So for the teal, you could do either one shade or two shades. I mean, how fancy do you want to go? I would say two shades is a fancier way to do it, for sure, and will look really great. But also, if you want to simplify it, one shade is okay. There is nothing wrong with just one shade. So I'm going to start by mixing my teal, and you can use a large brush or medium. They're easier to mix with versus small one. So I'm going to take some white, put it on the side. I'm going to add some blue to about a medium light. I'm going to create a color that's about medium light blue. So I think this is great for my darker version of teal. And then I'm going to start adding yellow little by little. So do you see I take a tiny, tiny smidge on the corner and I add it in. And if it's not enough, then I can always add a little bit more. But you don't want to overdo this with green because with yellow, because it's going to turn everything green really fast. So you have to be mindful, very, very mindful of how much yellow you're adding. So always safe to say, add little by little, tiny touch by tiny touch, until you arrive at desired color. I think I actually overdid it a little bit with yellow. It's still a nice color, but it's not what I was looking for. So that's why I'm adding a bit more blue here. Okay, let's try this one. Let's see how it goes. So again, I'm gonna take some on my brush, water it down it, of course, as I always do. And I'm gonna go mostly on the lower parts with this. And my lower section in general is gonna have a bit more of it versus the top. I'm gonna add some flicks from the bottom up, but you don't want to add too much so you don't cover all of your previous colors. And this looks about right. I like it. So I'm just going to continue doing that. And notice how I'm only adding it on the flower petals that I can see. I'm not adding it on those filler middle areas. Right here as well. And to the last one here. Now I'm going to add some of it to the other side as well. So let's add it to the bottoms and the tops. So the bottoms of the second layer first. And then to some of the tops. So with the tops, go quite careful. You don't want to overdo it on the tops. All right, I think that's good for me for the darker one, so I'm going to move on to a lighter one. And lighter one, it's so easy. You just add a bit of white to this, and there you go. You have a lighter version. And then with this one, we're going to add it to the same areas, but a little bit more central towards the middle. So let's say right here, I'm going to add it a bit more towards the middle. Yeah, I'm still adding it, I'm merging it to my dark one as well. I'm not just adding it closer to the middle. I'm adding it over the areas where I added the dark one too. But I'm aiming to have it a bit more shifted towards the middle. A bit here, a bit here on the tips, a bit right here on the very tips here too. Because we're using the light one now. A touch here. And again, as I go lower, generally I'm adding a bit more of teal than I would be adding on top here, both dark and light. All right, now I'm gonna move on to my straight black. So I'm just gonna take some straight black, again, water it down. Everything here gets watered down when it comes to fine lines. Just a little bit, this time not for transparency, mostly for consistency, just so you can make a nice long lines with it. And I'm gonna start by going in between. So if you see a really dark area, you're gonna flick from there. So for example, let's say it will start in between these two flower petals here. And then you can flick from the bottom up. So almost fades into the blackness there. But again, be quite careful with black because black is very dominant color. It doesn't take much to overdo it. You see I'm creating that separation between my flower petals again. All right, and now I'm gonna add a bit of that black in between those, in just the middles in general, but just again, cautiously. I'm not trying to add as much, but just a touch so they still have some black in them. All right, looks awesome. If you wanted to darken it up further in certain areas here, you could, but again, I would be quite cautious with that. And now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna wash off my small brush, put it on the side, and I'm gonna grab either medium or large, whatever works for you. I think medium is enough, but large works too. I'm gonna take some of that black on my brush and I'm gonna dab up a little section here. This is going to be like an underlay for some other things, and from there you can just flick it out to smoothen up the edge between the dabbed up section and your flower petals. And then we're going to let that black dry. And as that's black drying, we can add a bit of white on the ends of our, sorry, not the ends, the more like ends/middles of our flower petals. So this time you're going to be using straight white, and you can still water it down, which I would probably recommend, because again, if you needed this more solid at any point, you can just add it their second layer or take a non-watered down and add some more. But for starters, I would water it down. So I would take some white on the side. I would water it down, and again, I would use my small brush for this. All right, and I'm gonna go on to this mid upper part, and I'm gonna flick in straight white this time. So similar to what we did with light pink, do you remember? But this time it's gonna be less. You don't wanna add as much as we did with light pink because we have so much other colors here, right? You don't want to accidentally cover them up. We already worked so hard to position them all. It would be a waste if we just color them up fully right now. The white is just to enhance it, to bring a bit more contrast, to bring a bit more lightness. But yeah, it's there to enhance it. It's not there to cover anything up. So that's why I make sure you don't overdo this. And again, not every single flower petal needs to have the exact same amount of white. Some can have lots more, some can have lots less. All right, it's really getting there. Some white highlight here. Even some ends can have a little bit of white. Not all of them, they don't have to, but they could if you want them to. I will do just some of them. Yeah, that looks good. All right, and this hopefully is dry as well, our black. So in my case, it is dry, so we can move on to our orange there. So I'm gonna take my medium brush and I'm gonna make orange. So I'm gonna take some yellow on the side. I'll add a bit of red to it. And then to that, I'm gonna add a bit of white. And then with this color, I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm gonna dab, 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 dab. I'm gonna start dabbing right here. Notice I'm overlapping my black intentionally. So I'm basically covering it all up, dabbing, dabbing, dabbing with my orange. Once I have that, I'm gonna empty my brush and I'm gonna take straight white. And with a straight white, I'm gonna dab up the middle upper part. So starting right in the middle, and then I'm kind of gonna spread that a bit towards the edge. So you see, I'm just spreading it towards the edge. And I want this to be the most orangey part and this to be the lightest part here. And once I have that, I'm actually gonna start dotting it. So choose any brush that has a rounded back end. Or if none of your brushes have a rounded back end, you can always use a painting tip of your small brush. But if any of your brushes has a rounded back end, you might find it easier. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some white on our rounded back end and all around. So this edge, do you see where black connects with orange? All there, we're going to cover it with white dots. See some dots on a black, some dots on an orange. So some on the middle, some on surroundings. And you see how it gives you a variety of sizes dots. And the reason why is while your paint is still super wet, you just refilled your brush with paint, it will have a wider footprint, right? So it will give you a bigger circle, bigger dab. And then as it gets smaller, the dab is going to get smaller as well. Sorry, not smaller. As you start running out of paint, the circles that you make with this brush start getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And you see I'm spreading in both directions, a little bit towards the inside, a little bit towards the outside. Actually going to need to bring it all the way around here. All right, this is what it looks like. And now I'm going to add some of those white dots at around this section. So again, somewhere around here, they're not going to be as concentrated, right? So just a few here and there, but aiming for that general area. Okay, now that I added them here, I can start adding them everywhere else, but just very spread out. So like dot here, dot there. So it ends up being the most concentrated around here, the second most concentrated here, and then everywhere else very spread out, including background. So don't forget about your background. Add a couple dots on the very background as well. And then we're going to add a few dots in teal as well. So whatever teal you have left, in my case, I actually have like a mixture of dark and light, which is great. But whichever you have, light or dark, that's the one you're going to take. And you're just going to add a couple dots, not in the middle, but anywhere on either flower petals or the background, or both. And ta-da! After that, we are officially done. The only thing that's left for you here is find a good spot, the spot that you like, and then sign it. You can put your initials, you can put your name, you can put your signature, or anything really that signifies that this is your beautiful creation, your beautiful artwork. Let's sign mine somewhere right here. And then I'll tell you one more thing that you could do that's very, very optional. I'll sign mine right here. So another thing that you could do that's super optional is you could do a little bit wash behind it. Now for this, you're gonna need to wait for all your dots to dry. You cannot do it with the wet dots. But what you could do is take, if you still have this, do you remember the darker pink or red that we were using? So just a touch of that, and you add it in some of the corners in between the flower petals. Then you wash off your brush right away, dab it off on a paper towel, and with just a clean water, you wash it into the distance. And what that creates is the illusion of shadow there. Do you see? I'm going to show you on a couple spots. but it's a very tricky technique and it's not very necessary. So that's why I would say this is completely optional, literally as optional as it gets. Because you have to really blend it well into the background. If you don't, it's gonna ruin the look. So be very cautious whether you want to attempt that or not. But do you see what it does? It creates that look of slight distance between your flower and your background. I did it originally on mine. So let's put another spot right here, for example. And again, it doesn't have to be done literally everywhere. You can pick and choose where you're going to do it and where you're not going to do it. But again, just if you decide to do it, be very cautious. And make sure your dots are dry. It's very watercolor-like technique. So that's something else you could do, but again, if you love it as is, don't touch it. All right, and that's pretty much it, you guys. Thank you all for joining me. There is a link in the description of this video where you can post your results. We always love seeing how they turned out. So please feel free to do that. Would love to see how your beautiful paintings on wood or not on wood, whatever you were painting on, turned out. And if you did enjoy this, feel free to check out all our other video tutorials here on YouTube, especially if this is maybe your first time stumbling across our channel, or check out everything that we have coming up on our website. And hopefully I'll see you again soon. Thanks for joining me. Bye everyone.